Hey guys, Village Kev Talks is here, and this video is interesting because it's actually coming from a viewer request. So, a viewer commented on one of my videos saying you should make a video about being masked in the gay world, meaning masculine, and I actually had wanted to do a video about this, but I wasn't sure where to go with it, so it was kind of just in my head. And then this viewer requesting it made me think, I guess it's time to do it. So, my first thought when I think of mask, that acronym that's used, abbreviation, not acronym, the abbreviation, I think of apps like Grindr and Tinder where people say mask for mask, meaning they only want to date something masculine. They're identifying as that, saying they're looking for that as well. And, it's another thing I had a video called Judgment in the gay community if you want to check it out. The idea of this almost obsession with only wanting to be surrounded by masculine gay men and only wanting that is a huge issue, right, with gay men. And that was my first thought. But then I really thought about it more in depth, and I realized that it's always been relevant, at least for me as a gay person. Like, I remember being in middle school and knowing that I was gay and, grasping a lot of themes with that. And I definitely had a masculinity complex. And I've thought about this many times before, how truthfully, I feel like that was the hardest part for me of growing up gay. Just having this complex regarding masculinity and never feeling like I was one of the boys or that I was a typical guy. And the funny thing is, a lot of kids struggle with being gay because of their religious background or their upbringing. I grew up not religious at all, so for me, being gay itself was never an issue. I always knew it. Some of my earliest memories are linked to being gay, so I guess I never thought that there was something wrong with me because it felt so much like second nature. What I did have trouble with was this masculinity thing. When you're going through middle school and you're going through puberty, and then, the concept of like a jock in school begins, and then the concept of like feminine guy, it starts to develop, right? Because when you're little kids, everybody's kind of the same, right? Even the boys cry, the boys have high-pitched voices, but then, at least from my memory, and I don't know if other people think of it this way or thought of middle school this way. I'm assuming especially gay people would analyze things this way at that age, but I remember that being a big thing for me, and just it's sad. I kind of cringe thinking about it, but I remember trying to act a way that wasn't organic to who I was, just to fit in more seamlessly. Like, I think about gym class and how horrific that was, and how they would always have like a more competitive game in gym, let's say like a football game or a basketball game, and then the less competitive game. And of course, the girls would always go to one side, and the guys would always go to one side. And then I remember always feeling like, well, I don't want to be one of the girls, but I wasn't into sports, and I felt like I had to pretend. And maybe that doesn't seem like a big deal to people, but I remember having all these like inner conflicts about this as a kid, and just feeling so out of place. So the masculinity thing for me is a sensitive issue, I guess. But part of the reason I hesitated to even make this video until the viewer requested it in one of the comments was that I feel like a hypocrite at the same time, because I know that what I'm attracted to is more masculine guys. And I'm never going to be somebody who, in his profile on any app, says, only looking for masculine or whatever. I feel like I'm too educated to have the audacity to say that. And I also know that everything's a spectrum, and there are all types of people in the world, and masculinity is a very I think in our heads we all have a concept of what masculinity is, a pretty firm understanding, but then in real life it's much more nuanced, right? Like, there are guys who are pretty flamboyant, straight or gay, very flamboyant, maybe metrosexual, but they're very confident with who they are, and they're tough. And so, in a way, they display masculinity, but at first glance, they might not be what you would assume is masculine. My point is that I think it's kind of ignorant to limit yourself to a group by saying, I'm only into this. You're basically separating yourself from a group of people who actually could totally be within the realm of what you're attracted to. It's just not what, at first glance, fit your definition of that thing you're attracted to, in this case being standard masculinity. The other fascinating thing, which is an observation I've had, and one of my friends said it so perfectly, is that a lot of the guys who say this stuff, like a mask, looking for mask, oftentimes I've met those guys in real life, and they actually weren't that masculine at all. Like, to the point where it's kind of strange that you would put that in your profile, because you're not at all what comes to. If anything, I thought I was more masculine than them, which is saying a lot, because I don't think of myself as that masculine at all. But my friend said this in the best way. He said, typically guys who say that are the biggest queens out there, which I think is such like a good way of saying it. It kind of reminds me of, the guys who say they're 30 on an app and then turns out they're really 45, or who say they're 5'9", 5'10", turns out they're really 5'7", and I'm sure there's people watching who know exactly what I'm talking about and who've had this experience of thinking someone's a certain way from talking to them online, and then you meet them in real life and you're like, I would have been attracted to you anyway, but now I'm turned off that you pretended to be somebody you're not. And in that way, if we define masculinity as like a more broader term, that's a pretty unmasculine thing to do, right? To be so ashamed of reality that you're going to pretend to be a more macho, tall, strong, more robust version of yourself than you really are. That's lame. Like, at that point, wouldn't you rather talk to somebody who's maybe less seemingly masculine at first glance, but is actually like proud of who they are and is confident and secure with themselves? It's obviously a pretty abstract term, or at least more abstract than it might seem at first glance, masculinity. But I think there's a lot of different parts of it to dissect. There are certain themes that tend to come up a lot, right, in conversations about gay people. HIV and AIDS comes up a lot. This issue of judgment and insecurity and the emphasis on looks comes up a lot. And then I think this is that other big theme, masculinity versus femininity in the gay world, and how significant of a role it is in this realm. I'm sure a lot of you have comments about it because it is such a big theme in our universe. I really would love to hear what you have to say. Let me know your thoughts.